Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Tag Collab, where we explore the intersection of ambition, identity, innovation, and the unapologetic truth that sometimes lives in the in between. I am your host, Terry Arvisu Gonzalez, and today we're diving into a lesson that I learned not in a boardroom or a newsroom, but on a dirt trail in seventh grade. This one's personal. It's about running your own race, literally and metaphorically. And what happens when you look to the right and left and no one is there, and why pioneering can feel like isolation, and how that feeling is actually the evidence that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And I'll share a story about my son and a lost shoe that brings the whole thing full circle. If you're in a season of building, leading, or doubting, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. So, today's article is called The Loneliness of the Trailblazer, and it goes something like this. In seventh grade, I joined the cross country team. I inspired by my dad who loved to run. I was guided by instinct as well. I had a curiosity to see if this was something that fit in to me as well. At the beginning of a race, a gun usually goes off and everybody takes off sprinting. I didn't. I had this tendency to just start off at a pace and then continue running at steadily and at the same pace. And I would see people begin to fall behind. Um, Not trying to be, unhumble, but I was pretty good. And what I realized was that somewhere in the middle of every race, when I had kind of like come I used to have sort of a rhythm, and I was in my own, what's that called, like I had like a rhythm, and I would kind of zone out, to be honest. It was in the zone. And I would then all of a sudden become a little bit, and that was more like, I was kind of just running and unconsciously, like whatever, just thinking about other things. And eventually I would come up, I guess, for air. And, I was in the moment. And I would look to the sides and I would realize that there was nobody else running with me. I would look to the right, to the left, out of the corner of my eye, and realize that nobody was there. And so, of course, the first thing that would happen was, self-doubt. Oh my God, like, did I take a wrong path? Did I take a wrong turn? Did, I take the wrong path? Like, oh my God, and I would get scared. Of course, I was a 7 year old, I was a seventh grade girl. And eventually I realized that this pattern kind of continued every race. And it was because I was my steady pace had put me in a comfortable position to be sort of in the lead. Um, and there weren't too many people, um far ahead of me, maybe one or two or whatever, and I couldn't see them either. And so what this taught me really was to learn to feel comfortable in this space, which, I want to be completely transparent. When I share what I'm sharing with you, I cannot tell you that every single day I wake up and it's like this self-confidence. I know what I'm doing, right? I'm a pioneer, or, I don't compare myself to anybody. No. Well, I don't know about you, but, some days I feel more confident and some days I feel less. But what I did learn about that was that when I took risk or when I was winning, oftentimes I was going to have to learn how to feel comfortable being alone, and that my instinct would be to question and to compare. But because I was ahead, there was no one to compare myself with. In a world of social media and hyper performance, we've been conditioned really to constantly compare. But comparison is not just cultural, it's neurological. So, mirror neurons and social referencing. From birth, our brains are using mirror neurons to learn what's safe by watching other people. We learn what to do by watching other people. And we're doing it because it's almost a primitive way of surviving, right? Is um to watch and compare, and then we know that that we're safe, that we belong, that, all those things. And sometimes even with the most elementary stuff, right? Like even how to eat, how to all that stuff. Like we have it is a neurological phenomenon, not just a cultural phenomenon, for you to compare yourself with other people. That's called social referencing, and it's a way of surviving. It also makes us hesitate to go where no one else has gone because, of course, like I've said millions of times before, we are wired to stay safe. And sometimes that safety foregoes thriving. In other words, in order to survive, we tend to, the first thing is surviving. It's not necessarily thriving. And sometimes that works, and in some situations, and in some it actually holds us back. The second is the social comparison theory, which we subconsciously measure our worth by looking sideways. When there's no one nearby to gauge yourself against, no applause, no benchmark, it can feel terrifying. That's the hidden cost of leadership. These are things we do subconsciously in our everyday, comparing ourselves to other people in order to gauge whether we are okay. The innovation paradox. True innovation requires doing what hasn't been done. That means you won't see validation on the path, especially at first. Your only confirmation is your own internal compass. This is where psychologists call it integrative complexity, the ability to hold multiple truths and still move forward with clarity. Years later, my son joined cross country as well. In one race, he kept glancing to the left and the right, measuring himself against other people. He is highly competitive, so he didn't zone out. Quite frankly, he would oftentimes be more aware of, who was he competing against and where was he in that race. But what I noticed was the same thing, was that every time he looked to the sides or back, he would slow down. So much so that one day he wasn't looking ahead, he tripped, lost his shoe, and he, in essence, eventually ended up losing the race. It wasn't his speed that failed him, it was the distraction of comparison. And so the lesson here is that you can't run forward while you're looking sideways, and definitely while you're looking back. In journalism, I felt this too. When we would land or break a story that nobody else has, you always have the doubt, like, oh my God, did we get everything right? Did we miss something? Did we just get it totally wrong? I mean, even as many times as you fact check over and over again, you go through the editing process. When it's something nobody else is doing, that when, it would hit 6 o'clock on the air, and you're the only one opening up with that story, there's nothing that you can compare it to be like, oh shoot, we got this right. Oh great, we got this right. Or oh my God, wait, hopefully we didn't, but um we got this right. Like there's no comparison at all. So you had to really just trust the process. You had to lead without confirmation, right? That's what it means to be ahead. Otherwise, if not, you're just running in the pack, but there's nobody except, then you can't be exceptional. That's where the leadership identity theory kind of kicks in. Leadership isn't about a title, it's about identity you step into long before others can see it in you. Whether on the track or in a newsroom, I've learned true leadership is lonely, but not because you're lost. It's lonely because you're leading. It's trailblazing and pioneering and innovating, and it is super uncomfortable. And when you're truly in your lane, there's no traffic. But it's scary because you're there alone. This is where greatness lies. Innovation doesn't happen in a crowd. We live in a world that rewards noise, comparison, performance, but those things don't drive real breakthroughs. The real magic happens when you, and I like to believe when I say my lane, it's the lane God gave me, the path God gave me. When you follow yours, not someone else's. Otherwise, you're the 2.0, not the 1.0. Right? You're not the original, you're the copycat. Leadership isn't always loud. Innovation doesn't always look glamorous, and pioneering often feels more like doubt than confidence. But make no mistake, the person who keeps moving forward despite the silence, they're the one creating the map for the rest of them, everybody else, to follow. I didn't end up sticking with cross country, and yet it gave me, for whatever reason, I can't remember well, but I got MVP that year. But I think it served its purpose. Like some things in life just have a season. That was a season for me. Life moved on, but the lesson stayed. Today I don't run to win. I run to become. I run to pioneer, to do things other people aren't doing. And I'm still getting used to feeling uncomfortable. When you're in that space before everybody else sees it, I often say in life you can't be too late, or in business you can't be too late, but sometimes you also can't be too early. And so I won't get into it here, but this was one of the things that I really loved about Adam Grant's book, The Originals, where he does talk about how people who are ahead of their time or visionary um, can a can help to communicate to others in a way that meets them where they're at, and then can bring others forward with them into their version of the future. So that's a wrap for now. This has been the Tag Collab. And remember, we have a podcast, Substack. We also have a YouTube channel. The idea is essentially that whatever messages I have, I want them to be out there in order for where you're at, so that you guys can hear them and share them with people who you think need to hear this. If you're looking around and no one else is next to you, remember, it might not mean you've made a mistake or that you're behind. It might actually mean that you're ahead. And maybe, just maybe, you're being called to lead in a way that no one else has led before. If this episode moved you, pass it along to someone who's in a season of silent leadership or transition, like I call it, or the liminal space, someone building something new, maybe even doubting their path. You can find the full article and transcript at the tagcollab.substack.com, and also Apple Podcast and Spotify under the Tag Collab. Remember, Tag stands for Terry Arvisu Gonzalez, because I couldn't come up with a better name. So, anyways, hit subscribe and share this if you can. Until next time, stay in your, remember, you have a lane, run it with joy.